Hi, this is what I'm building. It's a medium level build. It's a barn workshop. So if you're building a hotel, this is not the video for you. This is where I'm going to be building it, which is in my garden. And this is how to get planning permission for something like this. Point number one is over communicate. And here's who you communicate with: the planners, your neighbours, and the parish council. The planners do a thing called pre-application advice. Here's my local authority website. You need to go on yours. It probably won't look like this, but it'll be pretty similar. And you can see that there's an application service. If you go into that, then you'll find that you can speak to the duty officer. Again, if a 7-story hotel or something like that, then you'll have to pay for it. In my case, I'm building an outbuilding. So I spoke to them and they said to me that in principle, they were happy with what I was doing. But remember, that's not the same as approval and things can change. Next up, a kind of bit of common sense. Tell your neighbours what's going on. The authority will write to them, they will know, so keeping your head under the parapet is not a great strategy. Next up, the parish council. I'm not saying you necessarily go to them, but keep an eye on them. They have got powers. Now, you might remember this bunch. This is the sort of people you're actually dealing with, and whilst I'm sure they were delighted to go viral, it made me shudder to see this sort of stuff going on because I've run into these people on planning before. They've got powers to call in an application if someone complains, and that means that they can make your application go in front of committee. That's not necessarily a place where you want to go, and it will delay you. So keep an eye on the meetings and see if someone turns up and complains about you. It may well happen, and it happened to me. Prepare your own documents. Here's an example of one that was done on my house about 15-20 years ago, but it shows you they don't have to be super snazzy. Actually, as long as they set out clearly what you're building, what it looks like, what the dimensions are, that's what the planners actually need to know. Now, here's the one that I have prepared for my project. Now, I agree, this is quite professional. I am actually quite good at PowerPoint, and this 3D rendering was done in an application called SketchUp. It's a free piece of software to use, it's online, and believe it or not, you can go onto SketchUp, you can learn it in about an hour, and you can put together 3D diagrams like this that you can spin round. Separate videos on that by other people. SketchUp is what it's called. So I did that, and I took some screenshots and I pasted it into PowerPoint to give the idea. Next up, again, using SketchUp, I just took all the color off and I angled it so that I could take a screenshot. I pasted the screenshot in, and again, a bit of an explanation. Now, there's no exact way to do this. What I then chose to do is explain a bit about the ground levels and explain how I do that. To be honest with you, I didn't need to, but this is important. Do put the dimensions in and show how high it's going to be, how wide, how it all sits together. And again, I did this myself from SketchUp. I admit I used Photoshop just to tidy up the style and the textures, but you don't need to do that. You could hand draw this if you want to. It just has to clearly show elevations, size, form, shape, length, all that type of stuff. I then did an overhead one. This was done in PowerPoint. It's just a few squares, okay? That's all it needs to be so they can see the overall dimensions. Interestingly, I made a mistake. It's actually 12 meters long, not 13, but there you go. Finally, I decided to put in a few ideas to show them what a lovely thing I'm going to build. You don't have to do this, and these are just screenshots from the internet, and this is what I do intend to make it out of. Last of all, I put on a bit of propaganda to tell everyone that it's a not great bit of land and all the rest of it. To be honest with you, this will all probably be ignored. That is your first document you need to do. Oh, and just one quick other bit of advice. Go onto the planning portal and look what other people have done. Just copy it. And the other thing is, if you want to hand draw it, hand draw it. Honestly, there's no awards for professionalism. It just needs to be clear. Next, you need to do a location plan. You have to buy one of these maps from Ordnance Survey. You can get them online, they're about £14. The scale has to be 1 to 1,250. Don't try screenshotting it and putting it into PowerPoint. I did this even though I paid for it, but it changed the scale and I had a few problems with them going backwards and forwards. Eventually, I got the PDF I bought, I opened it in Photoshop, and I then did that red overlay on top. But the planner said, look, just print it off and send it to us and draw on it. That would be perfectly okay. So no need to make a complete meal of that either. Finally, you have to do some documentation called CIL, C-I-L, Community Infrastructure Levy, something like that. Look, if you're building a house, you can get charged a lot of money. That's not really about today's video, but look up, if you apply for an exemption For a new build that you're building, you don't have to pay it, but you have to get the exemption before you start the build. We were caught out by this on a previous house build that we did. So just look it up, get it done, fill in the form, and in most cases, you've just got to tick the boxes and include it with your application. Stick to the facts. And this is a really specific thing. Now, when you go on to the planning application, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. It says to you, matters taken into account, matters not taken into account. Actually, this also applies to people who want to comment on your application. Just read these. I'm not going to talk you through this in this video to make it quick, but you can pause it and you can have a look yourself. But for example, it says here, the fear that a nearby house might be devalued. It's not relevant to planning. So have a look at what does matter, have a look at what doesn't matter, and make sure your application addresses the top ones and not the bottom. Now this is going to sound super cynical, but it's the rules and I don't make them. And it's this. If you have vegetation to clear, then clear it before you submit your application and it is not considered part of the application process. If you clear it afterwards, it is. You have to declare it, and of course it can easily trip up your application. I am not in favour of napalming sites. I think you should keep whatever you can and you should certainly replant later. You definitely should not clear vegetation in spring or early summer in particular, because there are nesting birds and other wildlife. Watch out for TPOs, Tea Protection Orders. You can search for those on your local council website to see if you have them, and that's the same for conservation areas which have their own rules. So clear the site before you submit your application. Finally, I suggest you grow a thick skin. The planning process is in the public domain and anyone can comment on your application, and they probably will. And here's the thing, it won't be complimentary. So just remember, no one likes new buildings, no one likes building sites. You're going to get these comments, don't respond to them. My advice is just suck it up. Now, if you're interested to see what I'm actually building for this planning permission, and by the way, at the time of posting this, I haven't actually got planning permission yet, then please subscribe. Also, I will be sending some updates to this video as the process goes on, and hopefully I'll have a positive outcome to share with you in future weeks. So make sure you click the subscribe button. Thanks everyone, see you soon.